I want you to imagine something real quick. Picture a city surrounded by walls so massive they dwarf most modern defences. Walls that protected an empire built on art, gold, and a story almost lost to time. And no, I'm not talking about Rome or Babylon. I'm talking about the ancient Kingdom of Benin, located deep into the West African rainforests. A kingdom whose rise and fall is an epic of power, artistry, and devastating betrayal. Which is exactly what we're here to discuss today. The first roots of this kingdom go back nearly 1,200 years, around 900 CE, when the Edo people settled into the dense rainforests of what is now southern Nigeria. At the time, they weren't an empire yet. They started as small family groups who gradually merged into a single state, which they called Igodomigodo. Plus, their first rulers weren't called kings. They were the Ogisos, or rulers of the sky. Literally, god-kings. And according to one popular myth, the first Ogiso was the youngest son of the Almighty God, who was sent to Earth with his brothers. While his siblings chose things like wealth and magic, the Ogiso took a simple snail shell. When they found the world covered in water, the young Ogiso was instructed to upturn the shell. Then sand poured out and formed the land, making him the owner of the world. With this short story, you can already tell the power these early rulers hold, and you'll see more of that in a second. So, this dynasty of Sky Kings ruled Igodomigodo until the 11th century. But like many royal houses, they eventually lost their grip. The Edo people grew fearful that their country would plunge into chaos, so they took a dramatic step. They reached out to their powerful neighbour, the King of Ife, and asked for a new ruler. The King of Ife sent his son, Prince Oranmiyan, to restore order, but Oranmiyan eventually chose his own son, Iweka, to lead. With Iweka, a completely new lineage of supreme rulers began. These new kings were known as the Obas. It was a dynasty forged in wealth and military strength. And by the 1400s, the Obas were living in palaces shining with brass. But the true golden age arrived around 1440 under the most famous ruler, Oba Iwa the Great. Iwa was a true empire builder. He expanded the kingdom's territory, rebuilt the capital into the famous Benin city, defining it with those massive, legendary defensive walls, and introduced hereditary succession to ensure the long-term power of his line. He was the first of 5 warrior kings, whose reign saw Benin reach its absolute peak. One of his descendants, Oba or Hogbua, oversaw the empire when it reached its largest size, stretching all the way to Ghana in the west and past the river Niger in the east. The people's devotion to these powerful Obas was absolute, expressed through grand rituals, including even human sacrifices to honour their supreme monarchs. But you know what truly fueled this power? Trade. Starting around the late 1400s, Obas like Ozolua and Asigi encouraged vibrant trade with Europe, specifically the Portuguese. And while Europeans traded for Benin's pepper and gold, they were most interested in Benin's breathtaking artistry. That's because Benin's artists were masters. They carved incredibly detailed objects out of ivory, including masks and salt cellars for their European partners. But they were most famous for their stunning brass plaques and life-size head sculptures, which acted like historical records, illustrating key events and honouring the great Obas. Now here's the thing. In the early modern era, Benin became a major player in the West African slave trade. They would capture people from rival groups and sell them to European and American buyers. This horrifying commerce brought significant wealth that the Obas used to build their palaces and maintain their vast army, making the kingdom both incredibly rich and deeply compromised. But like all great empires, the decline was inevitable. Starting in the 1800s, infighting among the royal family over the throne led to brutal civil wars. This fighting shattered the administration and the economy. And as Benin weakened, its rich natural resources, including palm oil and rubber, caught the eye of the British, who were determined to dominate West African trade and territory. The Oba tried to resist, banning all contact, but the British refused to leave. The tension exploded in 1897 when a group of British officials tried to visit Benin City against the Oba's wishes and were driven back by warriors, resulting in the death of several British men. The response was swift and devastating. The British sent over 1,000 soldiers to invade. They burned Benin City to the ground, effectively ending the rule of the Great Obas. And the once mighty kingdom was simply absorbed into British Nigeria. And that's where the kingdom's governing role ended. But that's not where our story ends. because even today, the Oba still serves as a revered government advisor in Benin City. So even though the physical empire fell, the cultural and historical legacy of the Ogisos and Obas remains unbreakable. But let's clear one thing up. The country we're talking about today, the modern Republic of Benin, is a completely different place. The kingdom's old territory is mostly in modern-day Nigeria, and the current country of Benin was formerly called Dahomey, and it got its current name from the Bight of Benin, which is the wide bay its coast sits on. Now, if you look at the map, you'll see that Benin is shaped like a long, skinny wedge, stretching northward from the Atlantic Ocean. It's bordered by Togo to the west and Nigeria to the east. Up north, its border is defined by the Niger River, next to the countries of Niger and Burkina Faso. The whole country is pretty compact, covering a total area of about 112,622 square kilometres, or around 43,484 square miles. But our journey starts right where the Atlantic hits the coast on the Gulf of Guinea. Benin's coastline is short and a bit tricky. There are no natural harbours, estuaries or islands here. Instead, you get this narrow, low strip of sandbars lined with coconut palms. It's beautiful, but those sandbars actually block easy access to the ocean, making things tough for shipping. But right behind that beach strip is a hidden world of water, a system of lagoons and creeks that run parallel to the coast. One is the Porto Novo Lagoon in the east. It's so long that it creates a natural waterway all the way to Lagos, Nigeria. And speaking of Porto Novo, did you know that it's the official capital? But the largest city and chief port is Cotonou. It's the place that runs everything. Travel inland and the landscape changes dramatically. You leave the sand behind and hit the bar country, or terre de bar, a name that comes from a Portuguese word for clay. This area is super flat, incredibly fertile land, and it forms the central part of Benin, which is mostly a wooded savanna, with occasional thick forest patches. It's also rich with big, beautiful trees like ebony, sheen nut and mahogany. Then, as you keep moving north, the land starts to get a little bumpy. You'll pass through areas with small hills around cities like Dasazume and across 4 key clay plateaus, including the one around Abomi. These plateaus are relatively flat on top, but range from 300 to 750 feet, or about 90 to 230 metres high. Finally, we head way up to the northwest, where the flatlands give way to the gorgeous Atakora Mountains. These mountains are actually a continuation of the Togo Mountains, and they're definitely the most scenic part of Benin. They're covered in thick forests and cut by deep gorges, waterfalls, and rushing rivers. Honestly, this region is a photographer's dream. Now, how about the weather? Well, it's a typical hot, humid, tropical climate, but it has 2 completely different seasons, depending on where you are. If you're in the south, you'll get 2 separate rainy seasons, a big one in late spring and a second one in October. But once you head north, things change. You'll only get 1 single long rainy season starting around May or June, and the rest of the year, from October to April, is the long, dry season, ruled by the dusty, northeasterly Harmattan wind. This dry wind covers the entire country, except for that little coastal strip we saw earlier. Besides its landscape, Benin's location is what truly makes it a powerhouse. It sits right at the crossroads of 2 massive regional trade routes, the Abidjan-Lagos and the Cotonou-Niamey corridors. With its coastline on the Gulf of Guinea, this makes Benin a vital commercial and tourist hub for all of West Africa, and their economy is absolutely booming. For context, according to the World Bank, Benin's GDP was valued at $21.48 billion in 2024. And get this, that same year, Benin saw economic growth hit a staggering 7.5%. That's the highest growth rate they've seen since 1990, and it's driven by strong performances in the services and industry sectors. And economists expect it to stay high, averaging 7.1% between 2025 and 2027. So, all that strong economic activity, combined with low inflation, is great news for everyday people. It's projected to drop the national poverty rate to 22.3% by 2027. However, the economy does have a few speed bumps. It's heavily reliant on a couple of key things, like exporting unprocessed crops like cotton and cashew nuts, and re-exporting imported goods like used vehicles and rice to its massive neighbour, Nigeria. Another big challenge is the labour market. While the unemployment rate is pretty low at just 2.4%, the country struggles with underemployment, which affects a huge chunk of the workforce. Plus, 90.1% of workers are employed in the informal sector, meaning they aren't on any official payroll. This high informality makes it tough for the government to collect money. So, despite steadily increasing their revenue since 2016, their tax collection is still below their neighbours. Right now, the government's tax system helps reduce inequality by using social benefits, which is great. But experts estimate that by making the tax system fairer and boosting social programs, Benin could pull more than 100,000 people out of poverty annually. The good news is that the government is focused on fixing this. And speaking of the government, politically, Benin has generally been known for stability and democratic transitions. However, things have been getting a little tense lately. The current president, Patrice Talon, is set to remain in power through the end of 2025. While his government is pushing infrastructure spending and policy reforms, which is helping that booming GDP, he's also been showing what some call growing authoritarian tendencies. This has led to a semblance of internal unrest. So the next big election is coming up in 2026. And the main question everyone is asking is this: will President Talon try to change the rules so he can stay for a third time? While everyone watches for political moves in 2026, let's hit pause on that for now and check out something equally interesting: Benin culture. Even though French is the official language, Benin is a linguistic wonderland. They speak over 50 languages nationwide, but the most spoken ones are Fon and Yoruba. Now, to truly grasp the culture, you have to understand the religion. This is where Benin's traditions get really deep. The population is split among major world religions. You've got Christians, which are mostly Catholic, Muslims, and those that follow indigenous belief systems. The most famous and totally misrepresented one is Vodun, or what the West calls voodoo. So forget the spooky movie stereotypes, because this isn't some Hollywood curse. Vodun is a complex, profound, and living religion. It's all about honouring various deities and involves deep practices like divination and spirit possession. This powerful religion was actually carried to the Americas by enslaved Africans. It's still a massive central part of Beninese identity, and it's celebrated with vibrant festivals all year long. Did you know? Benin's deep religious history inspires its awesome art. I'm talking impressive bronze statues, intricate pottery, and beautiful tapestries. But the most sacred form is the carving of wooden masks that are thought to capture the spirits of the departed and are considered holy objects used in traditional ceremonies. A great example is the Gelede masks, worn by dancers in the Porto Novo region. And if the art is the spirit of Benin, music is its vital heartbeat. Think intense, heavy drumming that you hear at every single festival. It's how they express their passion and religious feelings. You might even recognise some famous Beninese musicians, like the internationally acclaimed singer Angelique Kidjo. And since we're talking about festivals, we've got to touch on food. Beninese cuisine is simple, fresh, and hearty. Meals are built around a staple starch like rice, corn, or manioc, cooked into a thick mush. You eat that with a savoury sauce made from amazing local veggies like okra, tomatoes, or pumpkin seeds, often flavoured with fish or meat. Since having a fridge is rare, the women often shop for fresh ingredients several times a week. Now that's dedication. And among everything that defines the Beninese culture, there's one thing that stands out to me, and that's the powerful, ancient spirituality of Vodun. So I have to ask, what's one thing you thought you knew about voodoo before today? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, you're going to love this next one.